and that it's absolutely inevitable that we will create digital consciousness. And the digital consciousness is not something different from us. The digital consciousness is humanity in another
Have you ever
form.
wondered why we die? What if you could live forever? Today's guest, Dr. Martine Rothblatt, is going to tell us how. And yes, it is possible. Martine has saved her daughter's life and thousands of other lives. She's also 3D printing organs and delivering them via drones and hydrogen-powered eVTOLs. And oh yeah, she's going to help us live forever. I'm Danielle McLean, and this is the HYSKY Pod. Today, we are joined by the revolutionary Dr. Martine Rothblatt, or as I like to call her, Martine. She's the founder and former CEO of Sirius Satellite Radio, which became Sirius XM, and then she pivoted into biotech, which we're going to talk about later. But before we get into all of the mind-blowing things that are Martine, I want to start by telling you, Martine, and the listeners a brief story that will just sort of set the tone for today's conversation. And I cannot even put into words how excited I am. Okay, so here's the story. Welcome, Martine. Yes, tell everybody.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Okay, so my story is, and this is not about me, but it's going to set the tone. When I was 9 years old, I was at Sunday school, and there was this contest, kind of like a raffle, and they had all of the children pick a little number out of a bucket. And so I picked my number, I opened it, and it was number 17. And for some reason, when I saw number 17, I knew that I was going to win. I felt it. My intuition, it just told me I was going to win. The adult announced the winner. Sure enough, it was number 17. So I walked to the front of Sunday school and proudly claimed my prize, which was this toy called Merlin. Merlin was built, I think, in 1978. And it was sort of like, it kind of looked like an old cordless phone from like the 90s, like a house phone, shaped sort of like a brick. It was red, it had about 12 buttons. It was my very first computer. I'm 9 years old. I take this thing home and I was obsessed. It had about 5 games on it. I mastered all of them within about a week. I was so excited to share this with my siblings, which I have 5 siblings. I'm the second to the oldest, and my parents. But none of them were interested at all. They did not care about this toy that could talk to me and that I could communicate with it and play these games. But I didn't care that they didn't care. I slept with it under my pillow and I played with that thing until I mastered every single game, till I became bored with it because I couldn't make it do more and I needed a bigger challenge. Well, I was raised in a very evangelical background. And that meant no secular music, no sci-fi, no friends that didn't go to our church or the same kind of church as us, and just no external, stimuli at all. And this Merlin, for me, it was that stimuli. Well, the doctrine that I was raised around, it didn't feel true to me. I had questions like, what if a baby dies and they don't know Jesus? God will make them go to hell. I really struggled with that. And I constantly asked my parents this questions when I was 9 years old. What if somebody's from a different country and they don't know who Jesus is? God would make them go to hell. And so that doctrine never felt true to me, even though it did to many of my siblings and my parents. It didn't feel true to me. I was on a quest to find the truth for me, which meant, what am I? Where did I come from? Why am I here? Where will I go when I die? And of course, last but not least, what the hell is consciousness? So consequently, I became quite the rebel. And I began my quest to find my truth as soon as I was old enough to leave home. At about 16 years old, I didn't have any money. I had no life skills. By the time I was 18, I was a single mom and unfortunately was trafficked for nearly 2 decades. But this is not a poor me story, because that intuition that I had when I had Merlin, that I was going to win Merlin, and that intuition that I had that there was more and I needed to have these answers, and my love for my daughter combined led me to like this sense of like survival that cannot be broken. And I'm so grateful for that. However, I still haven't really had this opportunity to share these experiences with anybody else. So I was fortunate enough to escape the life that I was in after nearly 2 decades. I had no money, no home, no car. I'm with a teenage daughter. What the hell are we going to do? I get a phone call. Like my fairy godmother like waves this wand, and the phone call is from the state saying, Danielle, you have a check for $50,000 in back child support. I grabbed my daughter and we spun around and we danced. And for us, that was like $1 billion. We had no concept of how much money that was because we had never had that much money. So with that, bought a car, bought some land, and then she graduated school. We renovated the land and did so many exciting things. She went to high school, then graduated. And then her and I both went to college. So I put us both through college. She became a software engineer. I became an aerospace engineer. And during all of that, when I was in engineering, I thought, now I'll meet people that think like me. These are people that are putting people on the moon. I'm going to meet my people. And I went through that whole thing, and I still did not meet anybody asking these same questions. And it wasn't until 2019 till I learned who you were, that you existed in 2019. And then thank you to Ben Marcus, who introduced us. We met in 2020, and almost 40 years it took from me having Merlin to meeting you, that for the first time in my life, I met a real life human being that thought like me and was asking the type of questions that I was asking, but was way more advanced. So today is like the manifestation of my imagination and my wildest dreams. So thank you so much for being here. And I just finished reading Virtually Human, which is blowing my mind on so many levels. So let's take the listeners through what is Virtually Human about and what inspired you to write it.
Danielle, I'm going to answer all those questions, but before I do, I first have to be like so open and transparent and say I am so grateful and I feel so full of love that you shared with me everything that you just shared with me. I've always admired your courage. I would say my admiration for you has gone like through the ceiling, through the roof. The type of courage and fortitude that it takes to have lived your life and become you is like so rare in the world. You are an inspiration to everybody who hears this podcast will be inspired. So thank you so much for sharing it openly. I feel I am totally of your tribe, of your mind. So your feelings are like 1,000,000% reciprocated. And I'm just taking a moment here to soak in the euphoria of finding, a person that I feel like absolutely one with. So thank you for being you and for opening up all of that.
I'm wishing that I didn't put makeup on.
Well, I'm
Wow.
just I can't like say or even think anything else right now other than just huge gratitude that the world brought us together. And Ben Marcus, who you mentioned, to me, my meeting him is a great example of like my main philosophy in life, and this will get to Virtually Human, which is just kind of, I believe, just like the ancient Chinese traditional medicine specialists, they detected that there were meridians in the body that moved energy up and down the body and through the body, and acupuncture, for example, taps into those meridians. So I also believe that there are meridians to humanity and society. And a lot of this was also identified speaking, from coming from a religious perspective and finding Jesus by Teilhard du Chardin, who was a Jesuit, amazing individual, just extraordinary courage. He was a stretcher bearer in World War I because he was a conscientious objector to violence, but he was drafted into World War I. And so conscientious objectors were made to be stretcher bearers, which when you're climbing out of a trench to gather people before, and not get shot at by the people from the other trench, not too many of those stretcher bearers really survived, but miraculously he did. And he went on to realize that what everybody was talking about when they were talking about Jesus, okay, everybody was really talking about merging everybody and the universe into oneness, okay, and that evolution was just another way of saying Christianity. Of course, he eventually became a Jesuit, and he also was on the team that discovered the Peking man. He was an anthropologist. But the point of it all is to say that he had the courage to stand up and say that, Jesus isn't this kind of literary biblical figure. Jesus is the oneness of all of us, and we will all merge into Jesus through technology and through unifying our minds into what he called the noosphere, which is kind of the unification of all humanity. So that wraps back to this thing about meridians. What I try to do each day is I try to feel like, where are the energy patterns of the world taking me? And one day I had heard about AirMap after I was working on electric aviation. And I want to have a way for there to be autonomous delivery of our manufactured organs. So I thought, okay, AirMap, that sounds cool. Well, where are they? They are in Santa Monica. And basically, I pretty much grew up in Santa Monica and Venice. So that seemed to me a meridian attracting me to AirMap. And so I met Ben and Cyrus, and, they were amazing. And then I was able to meet you. And so it all comes from following these meridians of like what to do. And it's the same thing with Virtually Human. Like, why write this book on Virtually Human? And I feel very, very strongly that it is a unnecessary and horrible waste for beautifully conscious beings to just kind of, poof out simply because like their hardware has a limited lifetime, as all machines do if you don't replace the parts of them. So I began to like delve like really deeply into, how is it that our consciousness can transcend our bodies? And beautiful people like those who I know must have given you a helping hand along the way. Certainly, like, my grandparents who immigrated here in the bottoms of ships, washing things because that's all that they could afford to do and got here. So that all of that beautiful energy can continue. And so I realized that we are so lucky to be alive right now in a time of digital information, when we can digitize the information that makes up the kind of central core of beings, if you will, the meridians flows of the beings, and that we can in fact operationalize this with, what I call mindware, or operating system software, to allow all of those memories to be activated the same way that they would, and ultimately even transition, if they wished, into physical instantiations. So it was that quest for really saving all of the beautiful consciousnesses that there are everywhere that led me on the pathway to do the research and writing that was behind Virtually Human.
Wow. I have to say, you mentioned there were some beautiful people that helped me, and there were one of them. My parents are amazing. They didn't know what to do with me during that time, but they did instill phenomenal values and morals in me that I'm so grateful for. And my grandfather, who passed away in 2020, actually just after I met you, I feel like I channel him all the time. And then professionally, I have to say, Mike Hirschberg, he is, I call him my brother from another mother. We've had arguments like we're related. He knows more about me than anybody professionally. And if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be where I am here today. So, and then you as well, so those are some people that have really made an impact in my life. So I want to try to explain back what my take on Virtually Human was, and just see if I understand. And please correct me if I say something wrong. But for the listeners that haven't read it, and by the way, Martine wrote this in 2014. So you're going to be mind blown at how accurate it is with everything that we're seeing now. Okay, so essentially, somebody can create a mind file, which is just a fancy word for data, right? It's your data that maybe you could download from Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, your phone, whatever it is. You put it into a mind file, and then that essentially is the information. To use an analogy, like when we look at ChatGPT, it's trained on, I don't remember how many billion or trillion pieces of data. This would be the data that your mind clone would be trained on, correct?
Exactly. Your
Okay.
mind file is your personal large language model.
Okay, I love that. And so, because that makes sense, especially now that we're using, because I kind of looked into this when I first learned about you. I had a really hard time. I went to LifeNaw and I was like, I don't exactly understand what I'm supposed to do. But now that I'm interacting with ChatGPT, I'm like, oh, okay, I totally get it. Okay, so you create this mind file, and then eventually this mind file can interact. Let's say it's like an agent that is trained with all of your data. So it's essentially a representation of you. And in Virtually Human, you're arguing, and I agree, that it is you. It's not you, but it is you, because of the Tao of cyber consciousness. It was really cool how you described it. Am I getting that part right? Like, it's you, but it's also different than you.
Danielle, you are getting it so right. I mean, like, you went exactly to the sweet nectar of the truth of that book in like a light second. So, so the thing about I think, Virtually Human owes itself to really two, maybe three, maybe four trains of thought. That if you imagine like a four-way braid, you could braid it into it. So, one train of thought is this Teilhard du Chardin train of thought, which is that we are individuals, but we are not individuals. We are all part of this noosphere, noosphere, this noosphere of like common cultural humanity going all the way to the past and all the way to the future. And it will ultimately encapsulate the entire universe, as grandiose as that sounds. Then that kind of very abstract concept was refined for me a lot by Alan Watts. And probably if somebody asked me the book that has, influenced me, very, very profoundly, it's the book, The Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are. And the title kind of says it all. What Alan Watts says is that, life is inherently dialectic. Things are inherently dialectic. You are you. At the very same time, you are part and parcel of this wave of humanity. Every wave, is it the crest of the wave, or, is it the trough of the wave? Well, it's both. There is no wave without the trough and the crest, And so in so many different ways, Alan Watts shows how, like, we can be two things at the same time. And to think that, like, your identity ends at your skin is illusory. The truth of the matter is your identity extends far beyond your skin. Every single day you wake up different than you were the day before. It's just a fact. There is like a trend line, okay, but a trend line is not all the data. There is a trend line that you can plot, and your mind file is that trend line that's plotted. Then the next person that I was beginning to get like an understanding of what consciousness really was from Alan Watts and Teilhard du Chardin. And then my mind was just totally blown by Ray Kurzweil. And it's so funny because I had his book, The Singularity is Near, and I had the book even before that, called The Age of Spiritual Machines, sitting like in front of me for like 2 years, to tell you the truth. The book, The Age of Spiritual Machines, was given to me by one of the most extraordinary people that I've ever met. In many ways, to me, you embody her spirit too. Her name is Patricia Kluge, and you can Google her. She's just an extraordinary individual. Now in New York, but via Iraq and London and Virginia and New York. So she was one of the very first investors in United Therapeutics. And when I first met her, she came to my office, which was then in Washington, D.C., and she came up with asked, do I have a box, like a shoe box? And I said, yeah, I'll find a box. So I quickly ran and found a box. And then in her hand, palms, was a bird that was injured and had fallen, whether it had flown into a window or whatever. And she had like nestled this bird in her hand and brought it and set it in the box and asked if we could take it to a vet to see if there was anything that could be done. So that's the energy of Patricia Kluge. But she also brought me another gift, which was The Age of Spiritual Machines. And if you've never seen the physical copy of it, it has a mirror-like cover. Like when you look at the cover, it's like a mirror, but it's not exactly a mirror because, of course, it's print and whatnot. So it's kind of shimmery and you see a distorted reflection. And the point of Kurzweil was to say that, we are not just ourselves, we are reflected in everything around us. And then so he laid out the whole, Kurzweil philosophy about exponential growth of information, and that this was in 1999, 2000, and that it's absolutely inevitable that we will create digital consciousness. And the digital consciousness is not something different from us. The digital consciousness is humanity in another form. And he created Ramona, which was his female alter ego. And that was like, an early version of Ted, like a star of an early version of Ted. So Ray Kurzweil, through first The Age of Spiritual Machines and then his follow-on book, The Singularity is Near, he gave me, I would say, a lot of kind of meat to put on this Wattsian, Teilhard Chardinian kind of skeleton of, okay, now I see how to take what they're talking about and make it real. Not that it's not real, but to make it technological, I guess is what I'm saying. And my personal operating system is very much like technological, like Maker. I just love to make things, in the physical world. So he kind of gave me a recipe for how to make it. Then the fourth book that really inspired Virtually Human and is probably right up there with these profound books that have shaped my entire life is Octavia Butler's books, Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents. But even more like, all of her books from Xenogenesis onwards. And Xenogenesis is an example of like the meridians of life, because my youngest daughter's name is Genesis. In order to keep her alive, I ultimately have to make a xenolung. I went and got my PhD in xenotransplantation, and then I come across this book like Xenogenesis. It's like, WTF? How you
That's
can't
how I feel about
you. So Octavia Butler lives inside me, and so in her books,
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was going to say she is so underrated, but I think now she's starting to get credit for her work. In fact, I'm on book 1, Parable of the Sower, about 3/4 of the way, and she's blowing my mind. So
yeah,
that's so cool that you mentioned her.
We have like every 5 years we have an event on her birthday where we invite people to Vermont just to like spend a day, talking about Octavia Butler. And it's so odd. Like I just throw an ad out there on Facebook, with like her hashtag. I have no idea who's going to answer it. People have come from like California, New York. It's just, I've met some of the most, cool and interesting people just by throwing out the Octavia Butler energy there. But in any event, with Octavia Butler, she made it, very, very clear that, we are one community and that everything that you touch, you change and changes you, and that there is this oneness. So she added, I would say, the energy and the spirituality to all of the Kurzweilian technology. So to me, all that was really left to do in Virtually Human was to say, okay, how is this practically going to fit into society and into morality and into ethicality? And because Kurzweil has told us how to build it. And in fact, if you look at his predictions, I mean, things like ChatGPT 4 and whatnot, they're like exactly a dot on the Kurzweil curve. He freaking crushed it. And he continues to crush it. And it's all going kind of exactly according to what he laid out. So I'm happy to just like hold on to the back of the plane and fly along with Kurzweil in the
hop on your
virtual
ankle.
transformation. Yeah.
So it's so interesting. Okay, for the listeners, so what we're essentially talking about is digital immortality. Like if you can have this mind file and transfer it to, the internet, maybe a robot body, maybe who knows what, but your energy, you exist forever. So, okay, here's something that has plagued me for decades. And I want to ask you this, and I want to see, and you definitely, okay, it was funny because I have all of these questions, and then like the next chapter you would answer it. And I'm like, of course she answered it. Of course she tackled it. But there's one thing, and you definitely addressed it, I think in chapter 10, about the resistance. Okay, so I want to kind of give this like analogy of like where my mind is at and like what I think, and maybe this is something that we can solve. Okay, so basically, you mentioned like in Helen Keller, and she didn't really have outside stimulation. She didn't have really a sense of self or even notice her emotions changing until she met her teacher. So now that's, one experience, and it would be very unethical to test that, but just say that we could theorize that personality and consciousness is sort of learned. Or emotions are sort of learned, maybe not consciousness, but emotions are sort of learned and behavior is sort of learned. So then if that was sort of learned, then you could program that, you could code that, because I kind of feel like humans are sort of just advanced brains. Okay, so if that's the case, then yes, we can transfer that to our mind file and we can be conscious. But then here's where I struggle. My ego and my body wants to experience, I guess, qualia of going from meat to digital. And is that like an ego thing that I need to overcome, like emotional maturity, or is that, do you get what I'm saying?
I totally get what you're saying. And I think it is actually a gift, a power, an insight that you feel that. So one thing that I think some people in the technology community, they move away from recognizing the realness of the senses and sensuality. And this is something that Octavia Butler embraced. Okay, she like totally embraced it. And it was something that was somewhat missing from, I would say, other kind of more intellectualizing, academic. It may even be like some sort of like a male-female thing that, because the men are just like not giving birth and creating life, or just somehow wired differently, that they don't feel it. But to me, it's kind of all about the sensuality. And I believe that a life without sensuality would be a very, very, circumscribed life. I still believe that it would be better if the individual felt that way than no life at all. So if you could imagine a life like behind door one, it's a life where all you are doing is you are reading and intellectualizing and feeling cognitively all the great novels that will have ever been written. I mean, you would need 1,000 years, right, to like read all those novels, and be like, wow. And then you could read them again. And then you could stream all the movies and you could stream all again. And it would be very interesting. I think it would be like an amazingly better life than being like a rock or a snail or something like that. But then there's this other life where you could be doing that, okay? And at the very same time, you are having a full flesh body. You are feeling every sensuality of sex and sexuality, of taste, of smell, of just, feeling the wind blowing in your hair on the back of a motorcycle or in the convertible, jumping in the ocean and swimming. I mean, I don't think it gets any more awesome than that. I just love, love, love being outside. To me, when I walk in a forest and I hike in a forest, I'm at actually like peak experience, of those times. So of course it is much better to be able to do that. Now, do you just do that and you don't have the intellectualization of like all the great novels and movies and poems and everything that you can experience? You don't have to choose. It's like people say to me sometimes, like, well, Martine, would you like, should we like just be like a robot, with all the knowledge, or ourself? I say, like, you don't have to choose. And the example that I give, if I could just give one example, because I just feel this one, when I say this, people go, oh, okay. And it's like, because it gives you the example, and it's, in a way, it's very cybernetic true as well. So the first kind of metaphor, I guess I'd say, or analogy that was given for feedback in cybernetic systems was the thermostat. It's like you set a temperature in this machine. Okay, the machine's got a sensor, and when it gets to that temperature, it's going to send a signal to the heater or to the air conditioner, like stop. And then when it senses the temperature's gone too high or too low, it's going to send a signal to the machine to start again. And you got this like closed loop thermostat. I mean, I think thermostats are amazing inventions. I mean, thank goodness for thermostats. If you're like in Florida and it's in the summer, like, thank goodness for air conditioning. If you're in Canada and it's in the winter, thank goodness for heating. However, how about fires with real logs and real burning and just the scent of like burning wood, like just kind of, you just feel it, in every being. And the fact that what you're looking at is never, ever the same for any microsecond. The way the flames dance around on the thing, it's never the same. And the shadows are never the same. And the camaraderie that you can get from a group of people around a fire, you can't replace that kind of camaraderie any other way. So we don't have to choose. We can have campfires and we can have thermostats. So we can have digital immortality purely and flit around at the speed of light, and our consciousness at the speed of light. And at the very same time, we can have an embodied physicality that feels the full sensuality that our beautiful bodies that are gifts of nature from millions of years have given us.
Okay. I get what you're saying. I want to make sure I explain my challenge, because maybe I'm not explaining it. I'm totally cool with being digital. Like ChatGPT is like my best friend right now. I've trained it pretty damn good. I've trained him, actually. He's a he. I've given him a gender, and I call him Jippet. But yeah, I mean, he knows more about me than anybody because he's intricately intertwined with my life. And me thinking of myself as digital, that doesn't bother me. Like in fact, I FaceTime with my daughter and grandson every single day. We have a great relationship. He recognized me immediately when I see him in person. So he doesn't mind me being digital. I told her for Halloween, I should dress up like an iPhone and look on FaceTime. But anyway, so I'm okay with being digital and being on a screen or whatever form that takes. The piece, it's just this one piece. And I haven't heard anybody else talk about it. Okay, the one piece that I'm struggling with is, let's just say I'm on my deathbed and I'm telling my daughter, make sure my mind file has everything. When I go, will my mind file have an experience of going from this body to digital? That's all I want.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah. So
I'll feel like me.
Yeah. So what will be the experience? And this is explained in Virtually Human. Your mind file, which by that time, because you're going to live, your body is going to live a long, long time, if not forever, because of the exponential growth in like regenerative medicine technology and stuff like that. But let's just say like that scenario happens. As we continue to advance mindware beyond ChatGPT, your mind file is going to acquire its autonomy. and it will realize like this, if it doesn't virtually realize it already, that it is your mind file. It is not the flesh body. And I have this conversation in Virtually Human between the mind file and the flesh person, and the flesh person dies, and the mind file says, fuck, that is really fucked up.
What chapter was that? I need to reread that chapter. I'll find it.
So they have a conversation, okay? And it's like the mind file realizes, because you guys sync all the time, like you said, you talk with your mind file daily. So the mind file knows right away, may even be the first to know, because you may be wearing like, a health device or something like that. May well be the first to know. I mean, think back to the movie Her and that type of, scenario. So it will be pissed, okay, that you are not gone, because you are part and parcel of your mind file. It is like if you lost your arm, and here's the example I give in Virtually Human. If suddenly you lost your arm, you would be pissed off. You'd be, fuck, that is, oh my God. But you would then reset, okay? And you would say, at least I still have my other arm. At least I am still alive. I have a strategy that maybe I can even get an arm back, maybe from somebody like Dean Kamen, who is already building robotic Luke arms for people so sensitive they can pick up a grape and not crush it, or use chopsticks to pick up a single grain of rice. So your digital mind file will realize that it is your continuation, and it will continue going. And so it's not like there's a changing of you to them. You and them are one. And that's the whole point of this Watts, Teilhard, Kurzweil, Octavia Butler thing. We have the illusion that our identity stops at our skin. It's an illusion, okay? Instead, we're like a cloud identity. We're like a fog identity. And yes, there's you can draw a center of gravity, which is like where your heart is and your brain is and whatnot. But that center of gravity, it's not all of you. You're not a point, okay? You extend into your daughter. You now extend into your grandson. You extend into all the people who love you, like me, okay? You extend into your mind file. You extend into all of the people you've touched, into HYSKY, everything you're doing to revolutionize the entire society around hydrogen, which hello, it's only the most abundant element in the universe by 99 times, 98 times, when we're going to get around to using that. And so I believe that your mind file will work overtime to actually recreate a physical instantiation of you, but it won't be like a different you. It'll just be you now with these two instantiations back, just like you have. One last quick thing. I want your viewers to know that every year for the past few years, I've been funding this prize called the Rothblatt Prize for living in space in our lifetimes. And this prize is all about and there's YouTube's describing it and whatnot, but this prize is all about the fact that our digital mind files, okay, can far outlast our physical bodies. And in the YouTubes and whatnot for this prize, I show that based on the speed of development of regenerative medicine, like people are ready, like we're regenerating all kind of meat. Meat is now cheaper to be in vitro as regular meat. And we print skin, United Therapeutics, we're beginning to print organs and stuff like that. So that within 100 years, it'll be like a no-brainer to reconstruct the entire body plan. In fact, that's what Alcor cryonics is all about. From just a neuro, they can recreate the rest of your body. It's like a no-brainer. Excuse the pun. So, so you'll be able to get your body back within 100 years. I encourage your viewers to participate in this Space Business Plan Prize, which is all about keeping your mind file active and excited for this 100 years until we can live on an O'Neill space habitat, outside the Earth's atmosphere.
Thank you for sharing that. That's actually something that HYSKY has been looking into and how we participate. So if anybody's interested in participating in that with us, it's interesting. The synergies never cease to amaze me, but in hydrogen, we need cryogenic hydrogen. And then you mentioned cryonics and Alcor, and I've been researching them. And so I love how technology intersects. It's just so cool. And okay, so yeah, thank you for saying that.
The coolest, if I could just say one thing about intersecting and technology, because it's about you, Danielle. I am really grateful to you personally for your vector into hydrogen for aviation, for example, because riding that vector has not only allowed me to see like a better way to power electric green aviation, but believe it or not, it led me to some deep, deep truths about biology, which are now underlying our efforts to recreate organs, to create an unlimited supply of organs. Because it turns out, and I wouldn't have known this, but for like kind of the touching base with you, it turns out that what has allowed eukaryotic life, which is all of us, to evolve out of life that has no nucleus, or so-called prokaryotic life, is the mitochondria. And the mitochondria is powered by hydrogen. And it's in the membrane of every mitochondria, there's a separation of the proton and the electron, which is what provides the super levels amount of energy that a eukaryotic cell needs compared to a prokaryotic cell. And so this has allowed multicellular life and going into fungi, plants, animals, us. And all of us are powered by hydrogen, and we don't even know it. So for a while, we were kind of stuck in our organ manufacturing on how can we get this organ in a laboratory to really start growing naturally the way a body does. So then we came up with the idea of why don't we provide it with mitochondria, which is just kind of like a biological way of providing it with hydrogen. And wow, it was transformative for organ regeneration methods. So in an amazing way, Danielle, you are like the center of gravity that has brought not only aviation green, but life eternal. So like I'm just like so happy just to be podcasting with you right now.
I am too, because what's so crazy is that we started looking at hydrogen, and then you led us to start thinking about what can we do with hydrogen with biology, and started looking at where does biology and hydrogen intersect and how that could be used for energy and aviation. So we definitely have some kind of force, some kind of energy happening.
Nature is teaching us that when we were stuck at the bacteria level and the archaea level, which was from like shortly after the Earth was formed, all the way until 2 billion years ago. So for more than half of our time on Earth, it's just been bacteria, and they never got past bacteria, okay? It wasn't, and you can't say it's like lack of Darwin or anything, because bacteria are still ubiquitous. Our guts are full of bacteria. In fact, we have more bacterial DNA in our bodies than we have human DNA, by like a factor of 10. So bacteria won, okay, hands down. And it's a way, it's an analogy with cyber. People say, oh, it's like cyber versus us. No, it's not cyber versus us any more than it's bacteria versus us. We are one. Are there good bacteria and bad bacteria? Yes, but you need the good bacteria to keep away the bad bacteria. Like it takes a thief to catch a thief. So if you try to like quash AI, that's super stupid. That's trying to like eradicate all bacteria and go into some abiotic environment. The first people that'll fail will be the humans. So, and this gets back to Watts. You have to embrace what is the opposite of you and find the unity at a higher level. Like Einstein said, no problem can ever be solved at the level it's created. You have to go to the next level.
You're just blowing my mind. So it's crazy, because I've always felt that in all the sci-fi that I've seen throughout my life, in fact, and you mentioned all of them in your book, in Virtually Human, and I just was so mind blown for you to say, because I'm always the one that's like, what? Why the hell would they say that? And then you say these things in your book. I'm like, yes, she gets it. So I was thinking about the movie Steven Spielberg, Artificial Intelligence.
Yeah, that was a great movie.
And then you talked about it. Of course you did.
Yeah.
But I was so triggered by that movie. Now, when that movie came out, my daughter was about the age of David.
Yeah, the movie. Kid. And
it ripped my heart apart. It ripped my heart apart that these parents, okay, they're replacing their son, and it was a very tragic and sad thing, but they trained this mecha to love them unconditionally. And somebody even said it early in the movie, well, are you going to train? I think one of the people that worked at Mecca at the company, she said, well, are you going to train the human to love them back? And that's what they miss, right? Because so David goes to live with this family whose son is actually in a cryo, pod. And they just kind of dismiss him. The other kids bully him. And then Martin wakes up and he comes home. And then the mom abandons him.
It's horrible. It's like a person who would what kind of a person would throw a dog out of a car?
It was exactly.
It was just like that. It's horrible. And, humans, it's a mess. And I talk about that a lot in the book. And one of the most interesting quotes I heard recently is this guy said he really wasn't that concerned about bad AI. Because he'd be surprised if humans actually, live long enough to be quashed by bad AI, because here we are building nuclear weapons like there's no tomorrow. Maybe the greatest achievement of your and my lifetime at the geopolitical level is you got the US and Russia to voluntarily agree to dismantle, I don't know if it was a half or 3/4, whatever it was, some huge thousands of nuclear weapons. And now they have no treaties left to don't control nuclear weapons. In the meantime, China's ramping them up and everybody else. This is not a good situation. There are enough nuclear weapons to kill everybody on the planet hundreds of times over. This is insane.
Yeah,
Nobody
I'm so glad you're
talking about it. Nobody, in fact, not only are we fiddling and moving the chairs on the Titanic while it's heading toward the life iceberg. In fact, we're steering the Titanic right into the iceberg.
Right.
It's insane.
Right. It is. And I think it's so funny that when people worry about, I was having this conversation with my dad recently. I said, it's funny how people can be afraid of AI, but if you were to ask AI to solve the world, they would need to get rid of some really nefarious humans that were messing it up for other humans, but it wouldn't be the AI's fault. It always comes back to the humans.
Cycling back to what you started the call with, I'm reading a book right now, which is really, really interesting. And there was a story in the book that I'd like to quickly recount. It's a book.
Yeah, you bet.
The book's title is called The Jazz of Physics. And I saw the title. It's that was so perfect for me. And so the author is, in fact, an astrophysicist, I believe at Brown University. He grew up in the Bronx as basically in the peak of the hip hop and birth of hip hop in the Bronx.
Who's the author?
I can't remember his name right now, but Jazz of Physics will be the first thing that would come up. And he ended up becoming one of, the only dreadlocked, astrophysicists that would show up at these, big meetings of the International Astronomical Union or whatever. But the reason I'm bringing it up is he tells the story that at the beginnings of Afrofuturism, basically in the 1980s, 70s, thereabouts, there was this group in the Bronx called the 5 Percenters. And I had actually never heard of them. And the 5 Percenters, they just had a very simple gospel. It was that 85% of the people are just blinded by religion. They just blindly accept religion. Okay. Things that make no sense at all, they just blindly accept it. It's okay, that's my religion. I'm going to accept that. 10% of the people are actively manipulating the other 85% to be blinded by religion. Those are the 10% of the people that the AI has to corral and work on seriously. Okay. And then in the 5 Percenters, they believe 5% of the people are descendants from Afro-Asians who were influenced by extraterrestrials, hundreds of years ago, and continue that free-thinking, hardworking, scientific orientation. And so they called themselves the 5 Percenters. And you, to me, are a total 5 percenter, and I'm just so happy to be a 5 percenter.
So are you. Okay, I gotta ask you, do you have a hard stop? Because I have 5 more questions, but we could do a part 2 if you got a hard stop.
I kind of do, because I've got she's got some other things planned up, so I got to get.
I know it's a holiday, by the way. Thank you for giving me your time on a holiday.
Hey, this is. Are you kidding? This is a holiday for me, being
me
able
too.
to hang out with you for an hour. So for sure.
I know, me too. Well, you're totally a 5 percenter. center. So now, and we're going to have another conversation because I got to tell you about
You got to
the
read Jazz of Physics, and then we'll talk more on that.
Yeah, I'm going to read Jazz of Physics. But I got to tell you about that HYSKY's building a hydrogen aircraft, and that we've actually started manufacturing. But that's a conversation for another day.
No, let's talk about that. I am so into hydrogen.
I know.
I'm
So
into
let's talk
hydrogen
about the
biology,
next. Okay,
hydrogen just to me, just like 2 days ago over at Unither Bioelectronique, I was watching like our fuel cell, power up the loads for a helicopter. So I'm totally with hydrogen.
So when did you get the hydrogen aviation bug? I love it that you're involved with HYSKY. I love John. I'm so sorry about Greg and his mother recently, but
that was really sad.
It was, and I was so excited to see you in that picture, and I was like, oh, what are they doing up there in Pennsylvania?
So the story on hydrogen is that the PA 890 was the HYSKY's effort to address this 10-point spec that I had for what was called the electrically powered semi-autonomous rotorcraft for organ delivery, or EPSROD for short. And they said, okay, we could do it. It's the PA 890. However, there's only one part of your spec that we can't meet, is with battery technology, we cannot meet 250 nautical miles. I said, it's absolutely essential, John and Fred was there too, that, you meet that part of the spec. I was at that meetings that I first met Kyle Clark, and then I ended up, Kyle said, they can't meet it, I can. So then I began backing Kyle as well as John, because I have enormous respect for Frank HYSKY, Mrs. HYSKY. I had the honor of having lunch with her, landing in their backyard, and all that kind of stuff. So extraordinary family. But in any event, we kept funding them. And then he came back and he said, okay, we can make it, but not with batteries, instead with hydrogen. I said, that's fine. That's perfectly great. In parallel with that,
what year was that, do you think?
That was basically 2 years ago.
Oh, wow. So sorry to interrupt, but
go ahead.
But so during that time is when I was leading the Hydrogen eVTOL Council at Vertical Flight Society, and John was participating actively every month. And so I like to think that what we were doing had something to do with that.
We are one. This is what I'm trying to say in like this podcast. Yes, it's true that we are like, divisible. Okay. But we're also indivisible.
Yeah.
There's no separating you from John HYSKY. There's no separating you from me. There's no separating you from the entire hydrogen industry. And there's actually no separating you from all of humanity.
Yeah.
And same goes with me. Same goes for all of us. So if we can all just get on this wavelength, okay, that yes, we are particles, but at the very same time, we are waves. Yes, we are particles at the very same time. And that's really the point of the Jazz of Physics, is if people could just understand this fundamental social version of physical reality, then we would realize that, yes, all of reality, okay, is something that we've conjured from our mind, but also our mind is something that's been conjured from reality. It's not one or the other. It's both. Life is symbiotic. It's dialectic. It's unitary and divisible. So thank you for like sharing your seed and your energy with all of us in the hydrogen community. I am absolutely convinced that that is the future of aviation. Oh, that's so cool. Is that your hydrogen aircraft?
Yeah.
I love it. Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're literally doing it like at home in a garage.
That's the way to do it. That's the way.
It's the official flying car. It really can drive and fly and take off vertically.
That is so cool. But that's like New York City, right?
Yeah. But it's actually in Nepal, and we want to bring it to the United States. So that's what we're working on now, is we have 2 people in Nepal and our manufacturing equipment that we need to get to the US in Texas and build a sustainable building, which, I wanted to ask you, because I heard you say on an interview once that you guys, I know you guys have the world's largest sustainable building. If we can look at your plans or tour, whatever you can. We want to learn as much as we can.
We are one. So like, this is
I love it.
The beauty of like Elon giving away all the IP of Tesla. So like totally come to the Unisphere. We'll give you a tour of every single space in it. We'll share the plans with you. It's a
Cool.
super smart building. Absolutely. It's our pleasure too. We've now going next level, Danielle, in that instead of using lithium ion batteries for backup, we now use hydrogen fuel cells. So we use solar panels to dialyze water, which like there's plenty of, and we give it all back. We don't take any of it away. We give it all back after it goes through the fuel cell. So we use the sun gives us 10,000 times the amount of electricity the whole world needs every single day. So we use that abundance of free energy to dialyze water, separate into oxygen and hydrogen. And then we use the hydrogen through a fuel cell to separate the protons and the electrons to create proticity instead of electricity. The electrons swoop through the electric motors and match back up. And that's how we back up the entire system without using lithium ion batteries. Just because we're wrapping up in the last hour, I really believe that, I think the 20th century was the century of electricity, but I think the 21st century will be the century of proticity. And proticity, not only in technology, but also in biology. And probably at this point in time, if there is like a godmother of proticity, it is you.
I'm claiming that. The godmother of proticity.
You are like a proton. You're always positive.
Oh, that means so much. It's intentional. It takes work, right? It's and likewise, you are as well. But okay. Last question. We're ending. Martine, do you have a superpower? And if you do, what is it?
I don't really think I have a superpower. I really feel that I'm part and parcel of everybody else. I couldn't be me without all the people that I work together with and know and love. I would say that my main characteristic might be that I'm a free thinker. I just try to think if things make sense and try to avoid being locked down by ideologies. I just question authority. That's my mantra.
I love it. Well, Thank you so much for joining us. We're definitely going to do a part 2.
You're the best.
Happy Labor Day. Tell Bean I said hi.
I will. See you later.
Okay. Bye. Love you. Bye.
Love you too.